The final transmission came without warning. One moment, the Galactic Council's diplomatic channels hummed with routine chatter, trade updates, border disputes, minor protocol adjustments, and the next. Every screen across Oryx Prime flickered to black. Then a human face appeared. It was Ambassador Paul Dawson. His eyes were tired but sharp, his jaw set like stone. Behind him, the dim glow of shipboard lighting cast long shadows across his uniform. He didn't smile. He didn't offer greetings. He simply spoke. Effective immediately, Earth Alliance terminates all diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council and its member species, he said, voice calm but firm. All treaties, accords, and cooperative agreements are hereby void. Do not attempt contact. Do not send envoys. Do not approach human-controlled space. This is not a negotiation. This is a boundary. The message lasted only 43 seconds. Then the feed cut out. Silence followed. Not just on the screens, but in the great chamber of the council itself. Hundreds of delegates from dozens of species sat frozen. Some hissed. Others pulsed with bioluminescent distress. A few simply powered down their translation units, as if refusing to believe what they'd just heard. On Earth, the announcement had already been made. President Daniel Brooke stood on the steps of the Global Unity Complex in Geneva, flanked by military advisors and civilian leaders. Rain fell lightly, but no one moved for cover. His speech was short, direct, and broadcast live to every continent. For 200 years humanity reached out, he said, voice steady despite the weight in his chest. We shared our science. We opened our ports. We bled alongside allies in conflicts that were not ours. And in return, we were treated as children, as tools, as expendable. He paused, letting the words sink in. The massacre on Proxima Delta was not an accident. It was policy, and we will not be silent victims anymore. The footage of Proxima Delta had shocked the world. A peaceful mining colony, mostly families. Engineers, teachers, wiped out by orbital strikes authorized by a Krell warlord under the guise of quarantine protocol. The Galactic Council had issued a mild reprimand and called it regrettable but necessary. To humans, it felt like betrayal. Back on Oryx Prime, chaos slowly gave way to panic. Counselor Tavor of the Krell slammed his chitinous fist on the obsidian table, mandibles clicking in agitation. They dare? He rasped through his translator. After everything we've given them? Shelter, technology, a seat at this table? Nearby, Glyph of the Vorth rippled softly, its translucent form shimmering with concern. Perhaps we misunderstood their patience, it bubbled. They are young, yes, but they learn quickly. And they remember, no one had expected this. Humanity had always been loud, passionate, sometimes reckless, but never this cold. Never this final. For decades, they'd been the galaxy's eager students, absorbing knowledge, building ships, asking questions. Now they were slamming the door shut. Meanwhile, deep in the Sol system, work never stopped. On the dark side of the moon, inside a cavern sealed since the early 21st century, engineers in gray jumpsuits moved with quiet urgency. Jake Riley wiped sweat from his brow as he adjusted the final calibration on a massive ring-shaped device embedded in the rock. It hummed faintly, vibrating at a frequency no human ear could detect. This was Project Icarus, the backbone of Earth's new defense grid. Not a weapon exactly, more like a nervous system for the entire solar system. It could track, predict, and respond to threats faster than any alien fleet could blink. Riley didn't know about the transmission yet. He'd been offline for 72 hours, deep in diagnostics. But when his comm chimed with an emergency priority alert, he knew something had changed. The message was simple and standby. Full activation in 12 hours. On Mars, in a dusty research outpost near the Valles Marineris, linguist Maya Bennett stared at a cracked data crystal under a magnifying lens. She'd spent months decoding symbols from a wrecked scout ship found drifting near Neptune. The ship wasn't human. It wasn't Krell or Vorth either. It was older, much older. And its logs told a story the Galactic Council had buried for centuries. The so-called Great Accord, the treaty that brought peace after the long wars, wasn't about unity. It was about control. Specifically, it was designed to keep emerging species like humanity from gaining too much power too quickly. Advanced propulsion, energy shielding, neural integration, all withheld under the guise of readiness assessments. Maya's hands trembled as she compiled her findings. She'd tried to report this months ago, but her messages vanished into bureaucratic voids. Now, with Earth-cutting ties, maybe someone would finally listen. Aboard the Earth Alliance cruiser Aurora, Captain Lisa Morgan stood on the command deck, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the starfield ahead. Her crew moved quietly, faces grim. They'd just returned from the Helios expanse, where a Krell patrol had opened fire on a human freighter without warning. The Aurora had responded, swiftly, decisively. 3 Krell destroyers now drifted as silent wrecks. No survivors were recovered. No apologies were offered. Morgan hadn't wanted war. But she'd learned long ago that in this galaxy, respect wasn't given, it was taken. And humanity had been polite for too long. Now, as the Aurora glided toward the edge of soul space, she gave the order. Seal all external comms. Activate stealth protocols, and prepare the fleet. Word spread fast through human colonies. On Titan, shipyards doubled their shifts. In the orbital rings around Earth, recruitment centers overflowed. Teenagers signed up not out of fear but pride. They'd grown up hearing stories of alien wonders, of galactic brotherhood. Now they saw the truth. The galaxy admired human courage but never trusted human ambition. Well, ambition was all they had left. President Brooks returned to his office after the speech. He poured a glass of water, sat heavily in his chair, and stared at a photo on his desk. His daughter, smiling in front of a school on Luna. She was 16. She'd never known a galaxy that didn't look down on her kind. Maybe, he thought, she'd grow up in one that finally looked them in the eye. Back on Oryx Prime, the Council remained in emergency session. Proposals flew, sanctions, blockades, even a full quarantine of Sol space. But beneath the bluster, a quiet dread settled in. Because for the first time, the Council realized something terrifying. They didn't actually know what humanity was capable of. They'd assumed humans needed them. Now they weren't so sure. And in the silence between stars, Earth stopped asking for a seat at the table. It began building its own. Weeks passed with no word from humanity. No signals, no ships, no replies to the dozens of messages the Galactic Council sent on every known frequency. At first, some thought it was a bluff. Others believed humans were simply grieving. But as the silence stretched into months, unease turned to fear. On Oryx Prime, the Great Council chamber buzzed with tension. Delegates whispered in corners, exchanged worried glances, and checked their sensors constantly, as if expecting a human fleet to appear out of nowhere. Counselor Tavor of the Krell paced the obsidian floor, his armored limbs clicking with each step. "They are hiding," he insisted, voice sharp through his translator. "Plotting, building. They severed ties not out of weakness but preparation." Glyph of the Vorth floated nearby, its gelatinous body pulsing slowly. "Or perhaps they have simply withdrawn," it suggested. "They may wish only to be left alone. But why cut all contact?" Tavor snapped. "No species does that unless they mean to fight." Intelligence reports began trickling in, each more confusing than the last. Human freighters vanished from trade lanes near the Centauri rim. Deep space listening posts that once relayed civilian chatter went dark. Long-range scans showed strange energy spikes near Jupiter and Saturn. Fluctuations too regular to be natural, too powerful to ignore. Yet no ships were seen, no construction was visible. It was as if the entire Sol system had wrapped itself in a cloak of silence. On Mars, Jake Riley stood inside a pressurized dome, staring up at the red sky. Dust swirled in the thin wind, but his mind was far away. On the rings of Saturn, where the final nodes of Project Icarus were being anchored. The system wasn't just defensive. It was predictive. Using quantum-linked sensors hidden in asteroid belts and ice moons, it could detect incoming vessels weeks before they reached human space. More importantly, it could coordinate every human ship, station, and weapon as one living network. Riley had called it the nervous system of Sol. Others called it humanity's last hope. He adjusted his goggles and tapped his wristcom. "Node 7 is online," he said quietly. "All systems synchronized." Back on Earth, in a quiet university lab in Chicago, Maya Bennett worked late into the night. The ancient data crystal she'd recovered from the derelict scout ship had finally yielded its secrets. Buried beneath layers of corrupted code was a full transcript of the original Great Accord negotiations, held not in peace, but in secrecy. The founding members of the Council, including the Krell and Vorth ancestors, had agreed to limit technological access to younger species. Humanity wasn't the first to be held back. There had been others, species that vanished from records erased not by war but by policy. Maya's fingers flew across her console as she compiled the evidence. She cross-referenced ship logs, treaty amendments, and supply manifests. Every piece fit. The readiness assessments weren't about safety, they were about control. And now, with humanity gone silent, the Council was scrambling to cover its tracks. She knew she couldn't send this through official channels. So she did something risky. She encoded the files into a burst transmission and aimed it at every independent colony, every free trader, every non-aligned world she could find. Truth, she hoped, would spread faster than lies. Aboard the Aurora, now docked in lunar orbit, Captain Lisa Morgan reviewed fleet readiness reports. Every ship in the Earth Alliance Navy was at full alert. Shipyards on Titan, Ceres, and the far side of the moon churned out new vessels daily. Sleek destroyers, heavy cruisers, even the first of a new class of dreadnoughts. But Morgan wasn't just preparing for battle. She was preparing for perception. The galaxy saw humans as emotional, impulsive, loud. She intended to show them something else. Discipline, precision, patience. She walked the corridors of her ship, nodding to crew members who stood a little straighter as she passed. They weren't scared. They were focused. They'd seen what happened on Proxima Delta. They knew what silence meant now. It wasn't surrender. It was strategy. On Oryx Prime, the Council's fear deepened. A Krell patrol sent to investigate the edge of Sol space never returned. Its last transmission showed only static, and a brief, distorted image of something massive moving in the dark near Neptune. Rumors spread. Some claimed humans had built planet-killing weapons. Others whispered they'd made a pact with an ancient, forgotten power. The truth was simpler, but no less frightening. Humanity had stopped playing by the rules. President Daniel Brooks met with his war council in a secure bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. Maps of the solar system glowed on the walls, dotted with green markers, human assets, and red zones, potential threat vectors. "They'll come," Brooks said, voice low. "Not because they want war, but because they can't afford to look weak. And when they do?" asked General Cole, arms crossed. "Then we show them what happens when you push a species to its limit," Brooks replied. "Not with rage, with resolve." Meanwhile, on a quiet street in Seattle, a teenage boy named Eli watched the stars through his bedroom window. His older sister had died on Proxima Delta. He'd signed up for the academy the next day. Now he studied navigation charts and engine schematics late into the night. He didn't dream of glory. He dreamed of balance, of a galaxy where humans didn't have to beg for respect. Back on Mars, Riley received a priority alert. All Icarus nodes were active. The system was live. He took a deep breath and pressed the final command. Across the solar system, hidden platforms powered up. Gravitic sensors hummed to life. Data streams flowed like blood through a vast, silent body. Sol was no longer just a home. It was a fortress, and still humanity said nothing. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of warning, full of promise, full of the quiet certainty that the galaxy had made a terrible mistake in thinking humans would always ask nicely. Now they waited. Not in fear, not in anger, but in readiness. On Oryx Prime, Counselor Tavor stared at the latest sensor report from the Sol border. Nothing, just empty space. But he felt it, the weight of something unseen, coiled and watching. For the first time in his long life, he wondered if the Council had created not a student, but a rival. And rivals, he knew, did not send messages. They sent consequences. The silence broke not with a declaration, but with fire. A Krell patrol fleet, 3 heavy cruisers and 2 scout frigates, crossed into the outer edge of the Sol system without warning. Their mission was simple: scan, observe, and if possible, disable any human listening posts. They believed humanity was still hiding, still weak. They were wrong. Before the lead cruiser could even power up its long-range sensors, a pulse of energy rippled through space. It wasn't a weapon blast. It was quieter, sharper, like a needle through the mind. Every Krell on board screamed as their neural implants overloaded. Lights flickered. Reactors sputtered. Control panels went dark. In less than 3 minutes, the entire fleet drifted dead, powerless, blind. No shots had been fired from human ships. No missiles launched. Just a single, invisible strike from something deep in the Kuiper Belt. News of the incident spread faster than light. On Oryx Prime, panic erupted. Counselor Tavor demanded immediate retaliation. They attacked without warning, he roared, slamming his claws on the council table. But others hesitated. Glipth of the Vorth pulsed with unease. No weapons were detected, it bubbled. No energy signatures matched known human armaments. This was something else. While the council argued, humanity moved with calm precision. Near the asteroid belt, a Vorth mining operation, staffed by hundreds of workers extracting rare metals, suddenly found itself surrounded. Not by warships, but by silent, angular dropships bearing the Earth Alliance insignia. No weapons were drawn, no threats spoken. A human officer in a plain gray uniform stepped onto the mining platform and handed the Vorth foreman a data slate. It read, "Evacuate within 6 hours. This zone is now restricted." The Vorth complied. They had no choice. The dropships hovered like ghosts, unmoving, unreadable. When the last transport left, the humans sealed the mine entrances with fusion-welded bulkheads and vanished as quietly as they'd come. Again, no violence, only control. On Earth, President Daniel Brooks watched the reports from his war room. His face showed no triumph, only grim satisfaction. "They wanted to test us," he said to General Cole. "Now they know we're not bluffing." Aboard the newly commissioned dreadnought Odyssey, Captain Lisa Morgan stood on the command deck, arms folded. Her ship hung in high orbit above Mars, engines idle, weapons cold. She had not fired a single shot, yet her presence alone was a statement. The Odyssey was the largest vessel humanity had ever built, twice the size of a Krell command cruiser, shielded with layered gravimetric plating, and linked directly to Project Icarus. It didn't need to fight. It only needed to exist. Deep beneath the lunar surface, Ambassador Paul Dawson monitored galactic communications. The Council was fracturing. Some species called for war. Others begged for talks. A few had already begun pulling their fleets back to their home systems, unwilling to risk what the Krell had lost. Dawson allowed himself a small, tired smile. Fear was spreading, and fear made even the proudest empires cautious. On Mars, Jake Riley received new orders. "Activate Phase 2, the message read. He didn't hesitate. With a few keystrokes, he triggered a sequence that linked every Icarus node into a single unified field. Now, if a single alien ship crossed the Oort cloud, every human defense platform would know and respond as one. The solar system had become a single organism, breathing, watching, waiting. In Chicago, Maya Bennett watched her transmission spread. Independent colonies were sharing her findings. Free traders broadcast the truth across unsecured channels. Even some council-aligned species began asking questions. Why were we denied warp stabilizers? One asked. Why were our shipyards limited? The Great Accord, once seen as sacred, now looked like a cage. And humanity had just kicked the door open. Back on Oryx Prime, the Council held an emergency session behind closed doors. Tavor argued for a full-scale invasion. We cannot let them fortify, he insisted. One strike now and this ends. But Glipth disagreed. We do not understand their technology, it warned. What disabled the Krell fleet? What silenced their comms? We are fighting shadows. The debate raged for hours. In the end, fear won. The Council voted narrowly to assemble a coalition armada. Not just Krell and Vorth, but dozens of species all bound by mutual dread. They would march on Sol together, overwhelming humanity with sheer numbers. They believed that even the cleverest trap could not hold against a tide. They did not know about Project Icarus. They did not know about the quantum-linked AI that could predict fleet movements before they happened. They did not know that humanity had spent the silence not hiding but preparing for exactly this moment. On the bridge of the Odyssey, Captain Morgan received the final alert. Coalition fleet assembling at the Cygnus relay, her tactical officer reported. Estimated arrival at Sol in 14 days. Morgan nodded. Then we have work to do. She gave the order to raise shields, charge the main batteries, and link fully to the Icarus network. The Odyssey hummed to life, its core glowing with restrained power. Around it, dozens of smaller ships fell into formation. Cruisers, destroyers, support vessels, all moving in perfect sync. Like cells in a single body. On Earth, recruitment centers saw their highest numbers yet. Not because of propaganda, but because people understood what was coming. This wasn't just about Proxima Delta anymore. It was about whether humanity would be allowed to stand as equals, or be crushed for daring to try. Eli, the boy from Seattle, graduated early from the academy. He was assigned to a sensor post on Titan. His hands shook the first time he powered up his console, but his voice was steady when he reported in. The Station Gamma online. Ready for duty. In the quiet between the planets, humanity held its breath. Not in fear, not in anger, but in readiness. The Council thought they were marching to war. They were marching into a lesson. The Coalition Armada arrived at the edge of the Sol system, like a storm rolling in from deep space. Hundreds of ships, Krell War cruisers, Vorth carrier spheres, Zenthian gunships, and a dozen other designs from a dozen different worlds formed a wall of metal and light that stretched across the void. Their commanders broadcast a final demand: surrender or be destroyed. They expected fear. They got silence, then, without warning, the first wave vanished. Not exploded, not disabled, simply gone. One moment, 3 Krell destroyers led the advance. The next, their signals blinked out. No debris, no distress calls. Just empty space where ships had been. Panic rippled through the fleet. Sensors scanned frantically but found nothing. No weapons fire, no energy trails, no cloaked enemies. It was as if the ships had been plucked from reality itself. Aboard the Odyssey, Captain Lisa Morgan watched the feed with calm eyes. Project Icarus had done its work. Using gravimetric pulses tuned to the exact resonance of alien reactor cores, human defense platforms had collapsed the ship's power systems from light minutes away. No explosions, no mess, just instant total shutdown. The crews were alive but helpless, floating in the dark. The Coalition hesitated. Then foolishly they pushed forward. Big mistake. From the rings of Saturn, hidden platforms unleashed focused bursts of chronoton radiation, reverse-engineered from the derelict scout ship Maya Bennett had studied. The pulses didn't harm hulls. They scrambled neural interfaces, fried command networks, and turned coordinated fleets into drifting chaos. Vorth ships lost cohesion, their gel-based pilots disoriented. Zenthian fighters spun wildly, their pilots blinded by feedback loops in their helmets. Still, no human ship fired a single weapon. On Mars, Jake Riley monitored the battle from a deep bunker, hands flying over holographic controls. "Icarus is holding," he muttered. Predictive targeting at 98% accuracy. Every move the Coalition made had been anticipated hours in advance. Their formations, their attack vectors, even their retreat plans all fed into the system, all countered before they could act. Then came Commander Riley's turn. In a hidden hangar beneath Olympus Mons, a sleek, needle-thin vessel powered up. It was humanity's first folded space prototype, capable of slipping through micro-wormholes for brief jumps. Riley climbed into the cockpit, heart pounding but mind clear. His mission: reach the Coalition's command hub, a massive Krell dreadnought named Iron Maw, and disable its core relay. He launched without fanfare. The ship vanished into folded space, reappearing behind enemy lines before sensors could track it. In under 6 minutes, he breached the Iron Maw's outer hull, planted a data spike, and uploaded a virus that shut down its comms, navigation, and weapons. Then he was gone, slipping back into the void before alarms could sound. With their command ship blind, the Coalition unraveled. Ships collided in confusion. Orders contradicted each other. Some turned to flee. Others fired wildly into empty space. At that moment, Maya Bennett made her move. From a secure broadcast station in Geneva, she sent her final transmission not just to Earth, but across every open channel in the galaxy. The truth about the Great Accord poured out. The hidden clauses, the suppressed technologies, the erased species. She included logs, treaties, voice recordings, proof. The message spread like wildfire. Even in the middle of battle, some alien crews paused. Pilots questioned their orders. Officers demanded answers from their governments. On Oryx Prime, entire delegations walked out of the Emergency Council, refusing to fight for a lie. Back in Sol space, Captain Morgan finally gave the order. "All ships hold position. Cease all offensive actions." The human fleet stopped, not because they were losing, because they had already won. The Coalition Armada, broken and confused, drifted in disarray. No shots had been fired at their hulls. No lives had been taken by human hands. Yet they were defeated, not by force but by truth and precision. President Daniel Brooks addressed the galaxy live from Geneva. His voice was quiet but firm. "We did not want this war," he said. "But we will not be controlled. We will not be silenced." And we will not forget what was done to us and to others. He paused. The choice is yours now. Keep lying, or start listening. On the bridge of the Odyssey, Morgan watched the enemy ships power down one by one. Some raised white flags, human symbols they'd learned from old archives. Others simply turned and fled. None attacked. Eli, on his sensor post at Titan, reported the last hostile signature fading from range. All clear, he said, voice steady. Jake Riley landed his prototype safely on Mars, greeted by engineers who clapped him on the back in silent respect. Maya Bennett stood in her lab, watching alien news feeds as species across the galaxy demanded investigations, reforms, resignations. The old order was crumbling, not from bombs but from honesty. And deep in Lunar Command, Ambassador Dawson received his first unsolicited message in months. It was from a minor species called the Lyra, small bird-like beings who had long been ignored by the Council. Their message was simple: we believe you. What do you need? Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. It had exposed it, and in doing so, it had changed everything. The old Galactic Council did not fall with a bang, but with a whisper. One by one, its member species withdrew. The Krell recalled their envoys in shame. The Vorth dissolved their delegation after public protests on their homeworlds. Even the proud Zenthians, who had once mocked human emotional weakness, now sent quiet requests for dialogue. The truth Maya Bennett had broadcast could not be undone. Species that had lived under the Council's shadow for generations began asking hard questions and demanding real answers. On Earth, President Daniel Brooks stood before a new assembly, not in Geneva, but in orbit aboard the newly christened peace station, Horizon. Around him floated representatives from over 40 worlds, many of them small, overlooked species who had never been allowed a voice before. They came not as petitioners, but as equals. Brooks did not sit at the head of the table. He stood among them. We are not here to replace the old council, he said, voice calm but clear. We are here to build something better. No secrets, no hidden rules, no species held back because others fear what they might become. He laid out humanity's proposal, a new alliance based on mutual defense, shared knowledge, and open borders. Advanced technology would no longer be gatekept. Ship designs, energy systems, medical breakthroughs, all would be exchanged freely, with safeguards only to prevent weaponization, not progress. Some were skeptical, but many remembered how humanity had fought, not with cruelty but with restraint. They had disabled fleets without killing crews. They had exposed lies without seeking revenge. That restraint spoke louder than any threat ever could. Aboard the Odyssey, now docked at Horizon, Captain Lisa Morgan watched the talks through a viewport. She wore no uniform today, just a simple gray jacket and dark pants. The war was over, but her work wasn't. She had been asked to lead the new Joint Defense Initiative, training crews from a dozen species in human tactics, sensor use, and crisis response. It wasn't about making allies dependent. It was about making them capable. Down on Mars, Jake Riley walked through a newly opened research complex. No longer hidden, no longer secret. Scientists from 3 different worlds worked side by side with human engineers, studying Project Icarus not as a weapon, but as a model for peaceful early warning systems. Riley showed a young Lyran technician how the quantum link synchronized across vast distances. The Lyran's eyes widened in wonder. You built this to protect, she said. Not to dominate, Riley just nodded. That's the point. In Chicago, Maya Bennett packed her office. She'd been offered a position as cultural liaison for the new alliance, translating not just languages, but intentions. Her work with the ancient scout ship had sparked a galaxy-wide effort to recover lost histories, to find the truth about species that had vanished under the old regime. She kept one thing on her desk as she left, a small stone from Proxima Delta given to her by a survivor's child. It was a reminder that truth alone wasn't enough. It had to be paired with justice. Back on Oryx Prime, the great council chamber sat empty. Dust gathered on the obsidian table. The statues of past leaders stood silent, their glory now hollow. A few maintenance drones still hummed in the corridors, but no one came to speak, to argue, to decide. The center of power had shifted, not to another world, but to a new idea. Eli, now a full sensor officer, stood watch on Titan as the first joint patrol launched. a human cruiser flanked by a Vorth sphere and a Krell frigate. They moved in perfect sync, testing new communication protocols. Eli smiled faintly as he heard the Krell pilot joke with the Vorth navigator over open comms. Just weeks ago, that would have been impossible. President Brooks returned to Earth after the first round of talks. He visited a school in Nairobi, where children studied alien languages alongside math and history. One girl raised her hand. "Will we ever go to the stars as friends?" she asked. Brooks knelt beside her. "We already are," he said. The galaxy was changing. Slowly, carefully, but surely. Trade routes reopened, not under council decree but by mutual agreement. Medical teams from Earth helped heal radiation sickness on a Zenthian colony. In return, Vorth engineers assisted in building clean water systems on drought-stricken human outposts. It wasn't perfect. Old habits died hard, but for the first time trust was growing, not because it was demanded but because it was earned. Late one night, Captain Morgan stood alone on the observation deck of the Odyssey. The stars stretched endlessly before her. She thought of the battles, the losses, the long silence that had led to this fragile peace. Humanity hadn't won by being the strongest. They'd won by refusing to become what they once feared. She turned away from the stars and walked back to the bridge. Work awaited, not war, not dominance, but partnership. And in homes across Earth, Mars, Titan, and beyond, people looked up at the night sky not with fear but with hope. They knew now that dignity wasn't given. It was claimed. And once claimed, it could never be taken away. The galaxy had learned to see humanity not as children, not as tools, but as equals. And in doing so, it had begun to heal itself.